Welcome to everybody today. I'm so excited that you could join us. One thing that it's important that's happening in the world is clearly the impact from technology and emerging technology clearly continues to transform the world around us. This is really a series that we want to put together that really allows you to hear from the experts. And that's one reason I'm so excited to have this panel together with us today. And really what we'll try to cover with the panelists is an idea of what's going on, but also how does it impact big companies, small companies, individuals? In other words, how does it impact all of you? And how should you be thinking about the emerging technology landscape? In particular for today, Web3 and the metaverse, I think, are going to be particularly strong themes from today. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly, and then we'll have a few questions that we ask them, including what I hope to be a fun lightning round towards the end. And then we'll spend the last few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes if possible, on your questions. So as we have this discussion, I would encourage all of you to send in your questions to the group, and then they'll feed them out to me, and then we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So without further ado, really the stars of the show, the panelists, Amanda Cassatt, Marco DeMiroz, and Mathew Sweezey. I'll start with Amanda. Amanda is the founder and CEO of Serotonin, which is one of the leading Web3 marketing agencies and product studios. And out of that, she also is a co-founder and president of Mojito. And Mojito is an NFT e-commerce suite engaging with top brands around the world, really, around the e-commerce and Web3 ecosystem. Marco DeMiroz. Marco is a co-founder and general partner of the Venture Reality Fund. So he's an investor. He gives us the investor's perspective, focusing on metaverse, driven by AI, blockchain, and different technologies across 5G networks. So really bringing in that investor, that deep investor view. And then Mathew Sweezey, who goes by Sweezey for the group. So Sweezey is the co-founder of the Salesforce Web3 Studio, where he works at the intersection of technology and brands, and really helping brands and Salesforce and Salesforce's customers in their Web3 journey. So I'm going to ask sort of a broad question to start, but I'll start with Amanda. So first, Amanda, hello, welcome. If you could talk, really actually give us a little bit more about Serotonin and maybe perhaps Mojito, but then I would love for you to sort of answer the same question I'm going to ask all three of you, which is, what technologies do you think are right there on the edge of changing the world right now? If you were to say, hey, this is the space that we should be paying attention to, these are the technologies we should be paying attention to, what would it be and why? But first, so if you could tell us a little bit more about Serotonin and Mojito.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. And hello to everyone listening. I started working in the space that's now called Web3, that we used to call crypto, in 2015, when I began contributing to the Ethereum project, when it was still called that. I was the marketing and PR gal in that motley crew, became chief marketing officer of a company called Consensus, where I worked on bringing Ethereum and many of the leading products in the ecosystem like MetaMask, Infura, Truffle, which you may have heard of, and many others, to market. After that, I started Serotonin to basically bring those best practices to a larger group of layer 1s, layer 2s, DAOs, DeFi, NFTs, Web3 utilities. If anyone knows what any of those things are, no problem if not, to market using the best practices that we've developed over time. In the few years that we've been operating Serotonin, we have reinvested our profits in building software businesses and spinning them out, raising venture into them. The first of those was Mojito, which is the leading NFT e-commerce backend that's used by Sotheby's, CAA, the Milwaukee Bucks, Liverpool Football Club, and many others to sell Web3 digital assets on a company's owned website. And then most recently, we spun out a company called Franklin, which is Web3 digital native payroll. So allowing teams that get paid in crypto to also pay their employees in crypto in a tax compliant way. So basically rebuilding like JustWorks or Gusto from the ground up in a crypto native context. So we do part services business, part venture studio. We work with a lot of the leading brands in the space. You can check it out at serotonin.co. To get to your next question, I obviously think blockchain technology and Ethereum in particular has offered us the next great computing paradigm. Web 1 introduced the idea of this interconnected web for sharing content information. Web 2 brought massive scale by simplifying the user experience. In exchange, we created this advertising paradigm where the user became the product. Web 3 is a term for the blockchain-based decentralized internet that's coming about. And that's really a realization of the original vision of the web founders who actually intended to create a native payments layer to the internet. If you look up in HTTP, there's actually something called a 402 error, which is payment missing. And the original designers of the web actually intended to build that, but they never got around to it, which is why all of these centralized platforms like the Facebooks and Googles of the world came about to create that monetization on top. And we have them to thank for bringing massive amounts of users to the internet, but now there are questions around data ownership, privacy, that those models don't answer. And that's what Web3 is really here to do. I would say just like really specific innovations. I think tokenization and the ERC20 token standard is a really important innovation that basically allows us to put a cell wall around a type of value and bring it into exchange with other types of value. And that's brought massive amounts of new value into kind of modelability and exchange. Another really important standard is the one that gave us NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is called the ERC 721 standard. And now there are some other NFT standards. And what that basically does is it makes a piece of internet property ownable. So the same way that physical property on planet Earth can be owned by someone, this is a root ownership system where individuals can, with their self-sovereign blockchain-based wallets, prove that they own a piece of digital property and exchange it with other people, which also has the potential to bring a vast new amount of assets into the modelable total economy. And then the last thing I want to highlight is zero knowledge proofs. Zero knowledge proofs is a particularly cutting edge area within the Web3 crypto blockchain world. Zero knowledge proofs are basically math that allow you to verify that a given wallet has a certain token in it or a certain amount of a token without actually examining the contents of the wallet, which is going to pave the way for a new era of privacy for digital transactions with this internet native money.
Great, Amanda. Amanda, really, so as the audience can tell, there's obviously deep, real expertise in this field from the beginning, so that's fantastic, but really pointing out a couple of important insights for the group, which is one is, we've seen this movie before, right? This is Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3. We've seen some of these patterns. And so at some level, this is an evolution from before, and it was part of the original intent. I love your highlight of that, Amanda. And secondly, there's some really important standards that are out there that allow you to define value, store value, and exchange value, right? And that just is if you think about the nature of society overall, a lot of society is built around the concept of that ownership of property and exchange of value of property. But let's get Marco. I want to same thing first. Tell the group about what the Venture Reality Fund is and what you're focused on. But same question to you. When I say what technologies are changing the world right now, what's on the cusp of there? What would your answer be? So, Marco.
Yes, thank you. So from our perspective, just going back a little bit, we started the journey, my partner and I, about a little bit over 6 years ago. And for us, our passion was emerging technologies like AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, and later blockchain will be transformative to both consumer and enterprise businesses. So when we started this 6.5 years ago, people were like, what are you doing? That seems like a small opportunity. And we were fortunate to raise our first fund from a number of strategic investors, ended up investing in 42 companies. And fast forward, we're now in the middle of raising fund 2. Fund One has been the top performer of its vintage. We have, by the way, I'm not really doing a chest pounding versus like talking about emerging market investments. And so we have our first unicorn, Rec Room, which is sort of Web 2.5, metaverse, and others are coming up. And, for us, this was really what we call 3.0, Web 3.0. But our original premise was the future of computing to be defined by AI, AR, VR, and later blockchain. And Fund 2 is really about the future of the internet, which we call metaverse / Web 3, again, defined by these tech vectors of AI, AR, VR, blockchain, and across 5G networks. And so we're actually actively investing in the sector. For us, this is really a 10 to 15 year cycle. If you look at the 1.0, as Amanda was talking about, so in the early 90s, and then 2005, 2.0, social networks and more clustered, social engagement environments. 3.0 is more decentralized, open, and really sort of combines your real and digital identities, preserve and protects your, agency, and empowers not only you, but any creator that has the ability to create and really post and mint his or her assets. We don't necessarily say it has to have, tokens. You can have various forms of digital asset ownership. But, to be honest, from our perspective, three schools of sort of the Web3 discussion. One is very crypto token centric, blockchain centric. The other one is very AR, VR, XR centric, immersive spatial computing, these devices and everything you put on and go into these, like Ready Player One type of, metaverses. For us, it's really a combination of all of that. And it's going to take, again, 10 to 15 years. And we're actively investing in the sector in terms of seed and A rounds, from like metaverse as a service to bespoke solutions for certain enterprise and consumer application, as well as other platforms to engage people as we transition towards this new frontier.
So, Marco, I appreciate you said. I love that it's a 10 to 15 year cycle. So it's here, but we can be a little bit patient. It's here. It's faster than I think people thought it would be, but it's here. And there's going to be a little while. And it's funny because you started mentioning metaverse, and my team today was doing some testing. So I have the new Oculus and the HoloLens and my Bardo device, which is the big clunky heavy one, here, because we were doing some testing out there. So I thought I brought it in just because of the topic of the conversation. So Marco, thank you for that. Mathew or Sweezey, tell us a bit more about what you do at Salesforce. But again, same question to you. Like when we talk about technologies that are arriving now that are going to impact, I think Marco laid it out, the next 10 to 15 years. I think it's in the title of what you founded at Salesforce, but tell us what you think. But first, tell us more about what you do.
Sure. So first off, very happy to be on this panel. Some extremely bright people. So first off, what do I do? So I co-founded the Salesforce Web3 Studio. So we are the team inside of Salesforce, helping Salesforce figure out what Web3 means for us as well as our customers. So we are pioneering new products and taking those to market, building the world's largest enterprise Web3 ecosystem, as well as just having fun, meeting all kinds of cool people. But I think in terms of emerging technologies, first off, there's a lot. And if we use like general terms like Web3, that's a really giant umbrella term that encompasses many, many, many different things. And if you go all the way under that umbrella to the very bottom, you end up with the blockchain. And in between those two layers, you have a whole range of things that are emerging. Metaverse, DAOs, dApps, DeFis, tokens, tokenization. I love the answer from Amanda talking about tokenization. To me, the most important thing is smart contracts after tokenization. So tokenization is first a technology, then it's a methodology and a strategy. And I think the thing that I love the most in this world is the notion of smart contracts. So all tokens are smart contracts, but not all smart contracts are tokens. And so what I believe that we're going to start seeing is the use case of smart contracts to create better business processes. So as we think about why is this emerging and why is this important, yes, we have cryptocurrencies, and yes, we understand tokens, and yes, we've seen NFTs. We've only begun to scratch the surface of what we can do with this technology in terms of how it changes businesses and operations. And to me, that's the big thing that is the major focus. And to me, smart contracts, what we're going to start watching is every business using smart contracts to create better business operations that are faster, more efficient, trustless, permissionless. And that is going to cut across all businesses in all industries. Whereas if we think about tokenization or NFTs, to me, sometimes NFTs are much more of a brand lever, whereas smart contracts are much more of a business lever. So there's lots of different ways to slice it, but to me, that's the most exciting thing about the emerging technology space currently, to me, would be the smart contract.
So Sweezey, I'm going to go a little bit out of order because you started talking about how things change the world, in particular for the enterprise. So let me come straight back to you to start this, the answer to this, which is when we think about that broad term Web3 or the more specific term tokenization and smart contracts, what are you seeing that's coming into play right now? So if you're watching this for the corporations, the people who are working at companies right now who are saying, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? You work with big companies around the world. I mean, yeah. Salesforce around the world. So what are they doing right now? And maybe an example, a live example would be great. And, sure. And maybe paint a little picture of the promise of it.
Sure. So there's a couple of big things that are happening. Number one is everyone should be able to accept crypto. That's just the basic. Everyone in the world is needing to be able to accept that as a payment methodology. It doesn't matter if you're B2B, B2C, you should start investigating that. The second thing then is from most consumer-facing brands is the use case of an NFT for really a couple major use cases. One being some type of a loyalty or membership program, two being some type of a virtual good, which is an entirely new product line, or three being really some type of a digital twin. So being able to show provenance of some type of an aspect, really seeing that really big in luxury. So, brands that are doing this, like everyone's doing something. Scotch and Soda is a smaller brand out of Amsterdam. They just launched a brand new loyalty program. Starbucks just launched a brand new Web3 loyalty program. Pretty much everyone in the finance space is trying to figure out what DeFi means to them. So you're going to start watching whole new aspects of regenerative finance and all the lovely buzzwords that we play with. But I do want to make one thing really clear. So Amanda used the analogy of Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. And I think what we need to understand is how this changes the relationship between consumers and brands and really what each one means. So if we look at Web 1, what did that do? They gave us the access to information. And that changed the power dynamic between businesses and consumers. It gave consumers information and they didn't have to go to the brands. And that totally changed how we think about things. We now go to Google and ask questions. We don't go to a business and ask them a question. So information age was number one. Number two, Web 2 was then social and mobile. And really this changed the relationship in a lot of ways, but the one that is most important to me is it gave consumers recourse. It gave consumers the ability to say, hey brand, you're screwing up and I don't like that. I can leave you a rating or a review. I can go into social media and tell the world about this, right? I have Comcast. Well, I used to have Comcast and I have problems. You call the support line, you get put on hold. So it's the fastest way that everyone knows how to get support from Comcast. You go to Twitter and you yell at Comcast and you get the fastest support method, right? So it changed the recourse method. In Web 3, we changed the recourse method with data. Consumers now have the ability to own their data in a couple of different ways. But now this is going to change the idea of how brands really think about data. And they have to really realize in the new era, you're going to be renting data. The consumers will have the ability to control data via a wallet, and they'll be able to turn that on and off. And so we really now have to think about if data is the lifeblood or the oil of the modern business, and consumers now have the control of the tap, that has a really big consequence to recourse in between consumers and brand relationships.
Sweezey, I love what you're saying about the large enterprises, particularly the financial services organizations. We talked to the biggest banks in the world, some of the biggest investment houses in the world, and we're talking at the CEO, founder type levels, and they're all asking, I think, to your point, that question, which is, okay, DeFi, what does this mean? How do I get, my customers and allow them access to, cryptocurrency investment? How do I do it? What should I be investing in inside of this stack, not just for their own usage, but for their own investment pools of capital? So it's really, I think, an interesting, more recent development that I think will accelerate a lot of what Marco referred to over the next 10 to 15 years. But I think a couple of people refer to this, and we talk about that pathway from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3. Amanda, you talked about in your talks outside of this so far, Web 2.5 approach. I'm wondering if you wanted to talk a bit about what you mean by Web 2.5 approach, and what does that, where does that mean we really are today between Web 2 and Web 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Serotonin, we actually helped coin the term Web 2.5 a few years ago before it was in popular use. And Web 2.5 just refers to the fact that it's a gradient of companies that are somewhere in between being traditional and Web 2 companies and being fully Web 3 companies. Just to be super clear, a fully Web 3 company is completely decentralized. So it would be built on a decentralized layer 1 blockchain. Then you would decentralize the front end using something like IPFS or Arweave. And you would even decentralize the team itself and perhaps not have a centralized entity under any particular jurisdiction and rather do governance by DAO. And you see the largest DeFi protocols like Aave, Maker, Compound trying to get rid of their centralized entities over time and turn over governance to a fully decentralized DAO. And that's one approach to decentralize or to attempt to decentralize every part of the stack. Then you have traditional and Web 2 companies that are centralized in every part of the stack. Then you get everything along the way. So when you hear about a company like Binance or Coinbase or FTX, notoriously, and we can certainly go into that, those are actually Web 2.5 companies, not Web 3 companies. And they're even on the more Web 2 end because they're centralized exchanges. That business model has existed for centuries. And the only thing that's novel about those businesses is that they're giving consumers indirect exposure to Web 3 assets that they're usually custodying on that platform rather than custodying themselves in self-sovereign wallets in a decentralized fashion. So those are, for example, considered to be Web 3 companies, but they're actually really Web 2, Web 2.5. Then you get companies like Nike, Sotheby's that we've worked with extensively, Mattel, Prada, Adidas, Givenchy, all the wonderful luxury brands that Sweezey was mentioning that at the core have centralized normal Web 2 business models, but have in various ways dipped their toe into Web 3 to sell an NFT series, to launch a token, launch membership, launch rewards, all the great use cases that he was referring to. And there's a really full gamut there. There are companies that I think are going to progress across that and become more decentralized over time as they're incentivized to. And then there are companies that I think won't ever become fully decentralized because they don't actually have the problems that decentralization solves, right? Like decentralization is important at the base settlement layer, something like Ethereum, so that as you're settling out all of your different transactions, there's some third-party ledger that's not maintained by you or your counterparty that everyone can rely on. But around that, there can be all kinds of centralized architectures that make sense for a company if it's not going to actually be attacked by any of the attack verticals that prey on centralized endpoints, essentially. So we're going to see companies all over that spectrum.
Amanda, you hinted at a transaction that's been proposed today. So maybe you can outline for the audience really quickly what you're referring to as the big news.
So the big news in the space over the last 24 hours is, so there are three leading centralized exchanges: Binance, FTX, Coinbase. Basically, Binance was one of the first investors in FTX. They held a large amount of the FTT token, which is the native token of FTX. They chose to dump it all basically at once, citing some of Sam Bankman-Fried, who's the founder and CEO of FTX, some of his recent stances on DeFi regulation as their reason for doing this. Basically, FTX had a lot of the FTT token on the balance sheet to the point where the sale by Binance made them seemingly insolvent. That suddenly put them in the position of needing to get essentially a bailout from a sale to Binance, which had been kind of their adversary in the last move. Right now, the very latest on what we call crypto Twitter is that it doesn't seem like that sale is going to go through. And it's going to seemingly be blocked and not happen, which would potentially lead to bankruptcy for FTX and potentially some ramifications for the people involved. But again, this is really an unfolding situation of enormous magnitude. And it's sending shockwaves through the ecosystem because likely other holders of FTT tokens are being impacted. So a number of funds and treasuries in the ecosystem are being impacted. Investor confidence is certainly being damaged as a lot of investors try to pull their funds off of centralized exchanges, many of whom have had to pause or stop withdrawals during this bank run, some of them because they don't have the collateral to cover the withdrawals, but others just because of the volume is too high, which is creating kind of a flywheel of freaking out, to put it lightly. We're seeing that in prices, but I think the mistake that folks are making is assuming that this is a failure of crypto or Web3 in some way, when it's really a failure of non-transparent, discretionary, centralized finance, once again, that actually kind of mirrors the flaws that led to the 2008 collapse, which famously inspired Satoshi to create Bitcoin.
Can I add a color to this? Because what's really happened also, I mean, there's a crypto element that you can't really avoid, but there's a significant intermingling between Alameda Research, which is a hedge fund, and also FTX. And FTX kept claiming that it was backed by real assets. Actually, the assets were really FTT, and FTT was hovering around somewhere between $60 to $22 per token, and now it's in nothing. So almost. So I think it's obviously you can always say there's a human failure in these events, but another part is that this lack of transparency and just making bold claim not substantiated by transparent data and sort of the balance sheet information, it's really creating havocs in consumer confidence, right? There's almost a daily attack on any of the top NFT owners through all kinds of schemes, and then solutions are like you have to really learn Solidity to figure out your smart contract, so you're not saying empower all or whatever. And I think what we're seeing is that the current model isn't really helping consumer, but what Reddit did and what MasterCard is doing is more akin to, hey, we have an established consumer behavior interacting with their ownership of cash and other assets, and we need to create some sort of abstraction layer so that they have a trusted source and trusted environment that they can do these transactions. But I think overall, the crypto market has been quite disappointing from trust and consumer sort of interactivity perspective.
So Marco, you said that you're at your second fund, the beginning of the next sort of 10 to 15 year, mentally the 10 to 15 year cycle. Here's some of the challenges that are coming out now. And I imagine some folks are will try to solve those challenges over the next 10 to 15 years. So 10 to 15 years from now, you're going to see a more solid foundation where these things won't happen as readily as we might be hearing about, at least in the press today, these days. But Marco, I'm actually interested in this 10 to 15 year cycle in this context. What are you looking at investing in right now? What are the themes that you think are interesting, or the theses behind what's driving this second fund of yours?
Yeah, so we started, if you look at what we did with Fund 1 6 years ago, at that time, AI, AR, VR combo was very, very early, right? And the challenge for an early stage investor in an emerging sector is aligning with market dynamics. So, we said, okay, we're not really able to predict what's going to happen in 4 to 6 years, but we have a general idea of just the journey, and we need to make investments in these opportunities who can have near-term validity and market opportunity. So if you look at our investment practice, we basically insist and ask our portfolio companies to have a commercial product within 6 to 9 months after the round. And the benefit of that is consumer behaviors are changing dynamically, right? From crypto, non-crypto, and open and closed environments or something along the spectrum. What's really important is that if you have a solution that has near-term opportunity in the market, you need to go out there for both consumer enterprise and get user feedback. My partner and I were coming from mobile, gaming ecosystem, and as Sweezey was talking about, if I can use that name, that 2010, 11 were the beginning of like robust mobile economy takeoff, right? And that freemium became important. So the data really matters a lot. So for us is getting out there with a commercial product, get user data, understand the behaviors, and really be very nimble on interacting, updating, and really iterating the solution is crucial. So what we're looking at right now, if you look at our 10 companies in the portfolio, we have the companies that are creating content, AI generative or other forms. Companies that are infrastructure, like metaverse as a service for both, brands and sort of the high-end creators. We have solutions in AI, pure AI for empowering intelligent characters and conversations and really providing this intelligent layer across all games and metaverses. We're investing in solutions that are providing digital assets ownership across multiple platforms. We have a portfolio company that is really building sort of immersive product ideation and collaboration, as well as another company doing enterprise collaboration, future of work. So those are some of the highlights of what we're investing, but they all have near-term opportunity and near-term monetization and consumer growth and adoption curve opportunity. That's why they need to be out there early and really learn a lot from the feedback they're getting from the active user base.
So I'm going to do a jump ball question to the group. And this is around what I said in the introduction, which is we want to talk about how this is going to impact the people who are watching this. And sort of there's two levels of that, right? How does that impact them individually? And then how does that impact maybe perhaps the company that they're leading? If you are a traditional company, right? So you are a company that has been around for 30 or 40 years, you run in a traditional industry or traditional business, how should you be thinking about the Web3 universe and the metaverse and all these things? Like, what should you do to get started from your view? What's your opportunity? What should you be, how should you be thinking about that?
I can take a first, oh, go for it.
I'll go real quick, Amanda, and you can go. So I think first off, one is, let's not forget, where are you? Are you a leader? Are you a laggard? If you're a laggard, you probably shouldn't jump in today. That's just, you're not going to have the infrastructure. You're not going to get the support. You're not going to be able to do it well. But there's a couple of basic things I think, no matter who you are. One is you should start to investigate, what does it mean for you to put crypto on your books? Like, how can you accept crypto payments for any transaction? I think everyone should be able to do that. So you should start to have conversations now. And then the second thing everyone should start to understand is allowing wallets to connect to their websites, right? So understanding that there's a new structure of data that is a wallet and wallet ID and metadata, and what types of data that allows you to have about consumers. So I think across the board, those are the two most basic things that everyone should consider.
Great, thanks, Sweezey. Amanda.
Yeah, I think don't be discouraged from building because of the crypto bear market. These things are cyclic. And what goes down goes up historically, and what goes up goes down historically. They don't call this a builder's market for nothing. So many brands come to us looking to start building their Web3 strategies at the top of the bull market. And then by the time they actually have something they're ready to launch, the market conditions have shifted. And so they're not launching into the intended conditions anymore. And so if you're going to launch something, start building it now, and then you'll have the choice of conditions that you want to launch in. If you are an early adopter and have something to gain from being early, which many brands do, what I'd recommend is learning about the Web3 substrate, like what is this set of tools, how does it work, and meshing that with the unique DNA of what makes your brand desirable to its existing audiences in Web2, and weaving a poetry out of those things that pushes the capabilities of Web3 forward. Some North Stars for a great Web3 strategy are: one, is it strengthening to the existing Web3 community? Web3 is really an incentive alignment building engine, and Web3 communities collapse the category of investor, company, and user into a single economically aligned category called community. And so you want to make sure that your strategy is able to gather an economically aligned community and add productively to the Web3 existing ecosystem, as opposed to distracting and diverting resources away from that. Some ways to do that are partnering with Web3 native projects, partnering with Web3 influencers, using the most widely used Web3 infrastructures and tools. With your big brand, you're lending validation to those things and thereby growing and strengthening Web3. The next suggestion is have a long-term strategy. A lot of brands come into this space when it's frothy, looking for a quick cash grab. But what you want to do is actually build community over time and have a long-term roadmap for whatever Web3 products you're launching, because the community will know and find out really quickly if you don't actually have that long-term team that's staffed around it. It's not a way to make a quick buck. And finally, consider the metaverse as a potential storefront, right? I think the metaverse is going to turn into a mall. And when I say a mall, I don't mean in a shallow surface level way. I mean the kind of mall I enjoyed in the 90s, where you're playing arcade games, where you're hanging out with friends, where you're grabbing food and socializing and maybe occasionally buying some stuff. It's going to be the new Madison Avenue. It's going to be the new Rodeo Drive. I think every brand is going to, especially retail brands, have storefronts in Web3 enabled metaverses like Decentraland and Sandbox, and they're going to engage their communities in a novel way there. And it's going to reinvent the checkout and e-commerce experience in a Web3 native context. For example, in our work with Sotheby's, we supported them launching a replica of the Sotheby's auction house in New York in Decentraland. And you can actually go to that auction house and watch Sotheby's live auctions and bid on live auction items in ETH. And actually, during their recent live auctions, there have been more people watching and bidding from that location in Decentraland than in the actual physical auction house, which obviously has the limits of physics and gravity and capacity, right? So it's pretty much unlimited what these metaverse worlds are capable of. And the best way to think about them is like towns, not like games. It's a new place that you can build. It's the new website. It's the place where you can be exposed to new consumers.
Great, Amanda. Marco, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to tie this to, of course, the group we are talking to is the Asia Society group, and I want to make sure we tie it to the Asia tech scene. I know when you look at investments, you mentioned emerging markets or thinking about the world. So I'm wondering how you think about the technologies you invest in, and maybe in particular in your new metaverse Web3 and the Asia tech scene. What are you seeing there? Are you looking at it as a target market? Are you looking at it as a place that has great ideas coming from it? Like, what are you seeing as an investor?
I would say all of the above plus one more category. So, and one of the things we learned during the COVID and pandemic was that we sort of learned to become remote native. It's okay right now, in terms of you can have a very sort of virtual interaction with a customer base or the new sort of startup ideas, as well as our third category is the investors. And so from our perspective, if you look at the Asia Pacific, it's a great source of startup ideas, deal flow, as well as very robust community for a user base, because we are more open to having these user bases in a more extended and remote fashion than before. And the third category for us, if you look at our fund too, we have now major investors from Singapore, China, South Korea, and Japan. So we're very sensitive to what's going on in the sector. Not only looking at deal flow, but also products that really target the uniqueness of the region. And so that's part of our investment thesis, as well as part of our, core part of our investor base, to make sure that we are sensitive to dynamics across the whole Asia Pacific region. And I want to sort of comment on what my colleagues were sort of commenting. I understand the Web3 crypto talk and native apps and all that kind of stuff. For us, what's really important is really the utility and value. You can build a solution on a number of stacks and so forth, but ultimately it has to have consumer or enterprise value and utility. And we look at literally 1,000 deals a year. And in the last 9 months or 10 months, a lot of the business plans I've been looking at have start with NFT and ends with NFT, but they don't really talk about what's so fun about it. Why would people use it over and over again? And opening, you can buy a land near Snoop Dogg, but if nobody is visiting, it's not really that important. And so really focused on value and utility to consumer or enterprise customers versus whatever the Web3 tech stack they may be using. And that's really one of the things we're noticing in the market, that if you look at the blockchain or the gaming market, it's a 336 billion a year market expected to be this year. Out of that, 136 billion is sort of mobile gaming, and including some of the blockchain dynamics in both mobile and PC side. Utility is really important, and NFT, sort of focus, it just becomes very temporary. We know what happened to, a step N, and then in Axie Infinity and others. I think the prioritize the focus on value and utility and fun, and then you can leverage the other tech stacks to go along with that.
So Marco, that's very insightful. I actually wanted to stay just really quickly though on the Asia, sort of tying into Asia. Sweezey, Amanda, any sort of quick responses to how you see this playing out, in particular in the Asian markets? Because we want to make sure we take the full view of the world here.
Yeah, I'll just real quickly go with regulation. So there's a great slide, and Jeff, I shared that with you. I don't know if we want to share that with the audience, but if you look across Asia, there's a lot of regulations already taking place in countries such as Japan, South Korea, Indonesia. They're actually much more progressive than some of the other counterparts in some of the European countries with regulations around crypto. So they're already investing in these things. And also those markets are very heavy user-centric. Japan is probably the slowest to adopt in terms of the Asian-based countries, just because technically that's what we've usually seen, usually 2 years behind others. But what we've seen across those is we heard of Axie Infinity, right? The Philippines is one of the largest. South Korea is one of the largest adopters and users of these technologies. So it's a very big user base. And we also have brands like Animoca Brands from over there, which is one of the biggest brands in the metaverse. So it's a solid hotbed.
Amanda, I don't know if you have any quick reactions about the Asia angle and perspective.
Yeah, so Asia has had a long history in this space. Some of the very first exchanges were actually in Japan. Both Mt. Gox and also Kraken started in Japan, which is one of the largest global exchanges now. Korea also has a really thriving crypto market and always has had. It's been interesting to see the impacts of the Chinese crypto bans. There's still a lot of usage coming out of China, the continent, frankly, despite those bans, and some of those conversations have gone more hushed or underground, but there's still a lot of activity, even while a lot of the vertically integrated Bitcoin mining operations that used to exist in China have shut down, and that hash power is now being used elsewhere. That being said, the Mandarin speaking market is just a really powerful consumer market for all things crypto. Right now, actually, Asian NFTs are enjoying kind of a first moment in the sun. The Lao and Tribute Labs, which is the group that creates DAOs, some of the largest NFT collector DAOs like Flamingo, just launched a new DAO that's just focused on collecting Asian NFTs. And so that market's really heating up. Yeah, I agree with the others that we're going to see some interesting regulations coming from those markets. We also see markets that have really young populations. They mentioned the Philippines, but also India. A lot of young people, a lot of mobile first. Those tend to be hot markets for using crypto and also innovating in DeFi.
So I did promise, thank you, Amanda. I did promise the audience that we would do a lightning round. So I'm going to try to work that in, but make sure we get to some of the questions that are coming in too. So I'm going to do a short lightning round. So 1 word, 2 words, 2 sentences, something around that, just sort of quick hitting answers. And we'll go Marco, Amanda, Sweezey. So first one, if you could travel into the future, I'll put a time frame on it, 10 years. What piece of technology are you going to be most excited to see in its maturity? You're saying this is spectacular. I'm really excited to see this.
Well, I don't really have a crystal ball, and I avoid the futuristic type of stuff. But for us, really, the most exciting part is sort of like evolution and transition towards an intelligent society, intelligent lifestyles. Mm-hmm. So we can imagine, X years, say 10 years from now, that you have, immersive environments, decentralized and all that. But the user behavior in our minds would be, what do you do in your daily life as a consumer? You get up in the morning and say, hey, I have 15 minutes to play an interactive game, and sort of the voice command to your whatever the device is or environment and say, hey, I have a meeting with, say, Amanda and Sweezey at 11 a.m. I have half an hour to do something, light, and, give me a sort of RPG game with certain attributes so I can play for 15 minutes, some general progression model, have AI create that for you. And so our really long-term thinking is very intelligent, highly interactive, AI-driven lifestyles in terms of content creation, in terms of, enterprise solution, in terms of general, consumer media, entertainment, and gaming. So again, this is not a crystal ball issue versus, this is the part that I'm really excited about, like what's happened in the last 60 to 90 days on the AI generative environments, from text, video, image, text to text, and then text to audio. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and 10 years from now, I just can't wait to see what they're going to really turn into to transform the way we live.
Great, thanks, Marco. Amanda, 2 sentences maybe.
Fluid, efficient markets that are able to put cell walls around many other existing types of value and bring them into fungibility, along with ownable internet property, just radically growing the overall size of the economy and letting people transact fluidly within it is what I hope to see.
All the finance folks on the call, just their heads just went, wow, like that would be an amazing world. Sweezey.
Extendability of tokens.
Extendability of tokens. It's short and sweet. I love it. Okay. What is the best use case for an NFT you've seen? Or maybe it's just, what is the coolest example of something? Let's just keep it in the NFT Web3 universe that you've seen. Like you just thought it was the most fun or the most cool. It doesn't have to be the most important one. Marco.
Yeah, we're not crypto investors, but we invest in tech companies that encompass such solutions. Like if you look at our, again, fund tech companies, out of 10 companies, 7 will have some token offerings. For us, we're really excited about the utility that they bring to people. If you're on XYZ company's platform, like Obsess creates virtual stores for Chanel, Ralph Lauren, and all major brands. What they're doing is working with the brands to offer some utility to users and consumers. So we're really interested in sort of near-term and long-term utility that NFTs and other token offerings bring to the consumers. On the enterprise side, you have similar analogs, but focusing on the consumer, the utility and near-term value is what we're really excited about.
Yeah, so real utility, Marco. It's a theme, I think, for you. Amanda.
Yeah, so I'm going to point to a specific type of NFT and talk about why it's interesting. And what we're seeing a lot of this from big brands that I can't say the names of that have, let's say, very expensive membership programs. And if you are selling an 100K membership to something, people are willing to pay a higher price for that token if they believe that they can trade out of it, because their consumer mentality is that they're parking the funds or even investing the funds as opposed to consuming the funds. And that logic changes everything. Because if you have just, check out Radical Markets by Glenn Weil. The idea that with digital objects, there are things that you only need to use for a temporary period of time, and then you can exchange them and maybe even make a profit in doing that. That totally changes consumer motivation and behavior and means people are willing to spend more.
Wow, so instead of a membership fee, it becomes a membership ownership in the form of a digital token. Really cool. Sweezey.
Yeah, so I think in terms of like NFT projects and token projects, I think these are all great answers. I'm just gonna go with a really easy layup softball with just, let's just talk about the Bored Apes. I just think, I'm not saying it's a great project. I just think the notion of it's showing the world what's possible is a really cool idea. I just think the notion of being able to showcase the notion of shared IP, how we can start to do these things and work together, I think is good. So I'll just throw that one out there.
That's fantastic, Sweezey. Okay, it was an abbreviated lightning round because I do want to get to some of the questions that are coming in that they're populating in the chat. So coming, this is a very timely U.S. midterm elections. So coming out of the U.S. midterm elections, what will be the impact on the U.S. incentivizing tech and innovation growth in the U.S. as a national security issue? Okay, a lot of words there. So it's the midterm elections. Do you think the U.S. Will start incentivizing technology and innovation growth as a matter of national security? And I guess that it would be in the juxtaposition, as a national security as it relates probably to Asia and some of the efforts that we see there.
I can answer that in a really kind of macro sideways way, which is there's nothing more American than apple pie and crypto, right? Like it's a bottoms up tool that allows people to create value freely. And in our world, we're seeing an increase in interest in top-down authoritarian command and control kinds of systems. And most of the really smart technologists I meet are either working on AI or they're working on blockchain. And it's funny, I almost see AI as being really a tool of some of these authoritarian regimes in some of its use cases to advance the cause of society is looking more like that. Whereas I really see blockchain as a tool of like bottoms up kind of freedom and openness that pokes at the cracks of those kinds of command and control systems and pokes at their centralized points of failure. And so I think we're going to see a bit of a conflict of those technologies and how they're used. And I think the potential that Web3 offers is actually very much congruous with the kind of original American founding spirit and its design for markets.
I love that idea, Amanda, but I don't think our regulators understand a lot of this to that level. I just going back to—
I agree. I would love for them to, but I agree that they don't today.
Yes, I think there's too much noise in the market for the regulators to be able to see past the noise to see what it could do. So I'm just going to say I don't think they're going to be pushing this. But we do have the notion of we are looking at central digital currency, so that is good.
So next, great answer. Next question. So when we do look at Asia, do companies and governments based there define and support the development of emerging technologies? Is it the same, different, and why? And Sweezey, we didn't have time to share the slide, but if folks are interested, reach out and we can share sort of the different regulatory structures, in particular across Asia. But the question specifically is, do companies and governments based there define and support the development of emerging technologies? Or how do they develop to support it? Right. So clearly in China, as an example, there is a list of actual technologies that they name. And for all of us who've traveled out there, right, it's the alignment of everything from government, the university, through the venture capital firms around these technologies, which I find most impressive. But I'm wondering if what the panel sees.
I'll comment. I think if you look across US and Asia Pacific and Europe, every country has some sort of AI initiative as part of national policy because it is transformative and it really permeates everything. So that's one aspect. And that also has security implications in terms of face recognition, keeping track of people, data access, private data, and how your agency is protected, virtually and in real time. And the other aspect is really sort of, there's a desire to obviously want to have sort of autonomous, decentralized environments, but also some subgroups are also looking for regulation to protect people. And so, finding the delicate balance, I think is really what governments have to do, as Sweezey said, and they're not really equipped to do it. It'll take some time. Like European Union punted the whole discussion about this to February. They were supposed to decide this month, but they're like, it's going to take too much time for us to learn. So we need to do it in sometime in late Q1. Our ideal model is more collaborative, open, and to accommodate innovation, but and not restrict the innovation because of the sort of fear-based regulatory policies. But I don't know what's going to happen. But clearly, we're seeing initiatives related to AI and some sort of a crypto and DeFi related activities based on what's going on, as Amanda said earlier about FTX and then the ones happened before Luna and Terra and so forth.
The most interesting thing about the overall market to me is how much large traditional capital, A, has already come in, but B, is wanting to come in. And I do think there's something to regulatory frameworks and government understanding and support and establishment of how the policies are going to work that will allow that capital that significant capital that's wanting to come in, which would, of course, cause the market to explode even more, positively explode even more than it has. I'm told that we are at time. I just wanted to thank the panelists again, Marco, Sweezey, Amanda, for a wonderful, insightful, fun conversation that went too fast for me. I hope everybody who's watching enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you so much to all of you, and thank you to the Asia Society for allowing us to have this conversation.